Good evening. My name is Robin Castillo, and I'm the Associate Superintendent for Instructional Services, and I'd like to welcome you to our Special Education Town Hall this evening. We value our parents as our educational partners, and we wanted to provide this opportunity to answer as many of your questions as we possibly can and to deliver information that we have available to you at this time. I want to thank our sign language interpreter, Stacy Houts, for joining us tonight and assisting us with this presentation. We value you being here and supporting our deaf community. I would like to have our panel for this evening introduce themselves and their positions, and then we'll hear a few words from our superintendent, Dr. O'Farrell, who we appreciate as a strong supporter and advocate for our entire special education community. And now if our panel would please introduce themselves.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Teresa Pafford. I'm the SpEd Administrator over Special Ed and Psychological Services.
Hey everyone, I'm Carrie Carter, Director of Special Education.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ann Castillo, and I'm one of the Assistant Directors for Special Ed.
And I'm Ruth Steppe, I'm the other Assistant Director.
Move your sound.
Good evening. I'm Norm Anderson, the Deputy Superintendent. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Emer O'Farrell, and I'm the superintendent here in Clovis Unified. I want to welcome all of the parents and guardians of our students with special needs. We're delighted to have this opportunity this evening to answer questions, to have opportunities to clarify some of your concerns, some of your anxieties. You know, what a journey we've been just going through over these last few months, and it all started on March 13th. And when we launched into distance learning, literally overnight. And we recognized immediately that the impact of this whole situation was going to be greatest on our students with special needs. And I want you, the parents and guardians of our almost 4,000 students, to know that your kids, and they're really our kids, have been at the forefront of all of the discussions and the meetings that we've had regarding distance learning and what this is going to look like. And I also want to tell you, parents and guardians, you have been on our minds too. We recognize that the impact of this situation has been very, very great on you. During the spring, we launched into distance learning. Our special education team just stepped up. I heard so many great examples of teachers going above and beyond to think of creative and innovative ways to deliver services to our students, and actually some great examples of helping families out. But you know, was it perfect? No. And what we did in this summer was we reflected back and evaluated our experiences and listened to our teachers when they talked to us about all the challenges that they had. And we knew that our job was to try and find ways to overcome those challenges should we be in this situation again. And of course, here we are today, and we are in this situation. And I'm so grateful for the fact that we did engage in so much planning over the summer. But a big part of this whole 2021 school year is going to be you, our parents and guardians. And tonight is an opportunity to listen to your questions, to listen to your concerns, and to clarify those so that we can put your minds at rest. We might not be able to answer every question, but what I will tell you is that this team here and our team of teachers out in Clovis Unified, our greatest goal and our greatest desire is to make sure that this upcoming school year is as successful as possible for our students with special needs. So we want to hear from you. We want to listen, and we want to make sure that we leave no stone unturned. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Castillo, our Associate Superintendent of Instructional Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. O'Farrell. We appreciate your words and your sentiment, and we're looking forward to this evening and getting information out to our parents. So first, I want to thank all the parents who submitted such thoughtful questions ahead of time. We pored over the questions, looked at each of them, and we'll be addressing those this evening. First, we'll start the evening by having our panel members address the questions that we received ahead of time. Parents can also send in questions through our YouTube link, and we will address as many of those as we can after answering the original round of questions. If there are any additional questions that we're not able to answer this evening, we'll post some frequently asked questions next week that parents can refer to. I would also encourage you, if you have questions that are specific to your own individual child, to really reach out to your child's teacher or the special education office. And as always, they will be pleased to assist you and help you with any additional questions that you might have. Before I turn it over to our panel members, I'm going to review just the CUSD learning options that we have for the fall. Obviously, we learned from the governor that we would not be able to start face-to-face with our students, and so we created some online options that are available. And through our annual re-enrollment process with the annual information update, parents are being asked to respond whether they want their child to have traditional face-to-face instruction or whether they would prefer online instruction. And we spoke about this at the other town hall, if you were able to view into that, is that we understand that we cannot have students back face-to-face at this time, but we did ask parents to put what they were thinking that they would like to do at whatever point we are able to return, so that we can work on staffing and have options available. We have since put out some additional information to help parents understand those options. We ask that that be completed by tomorrow if possible. And there are also different types of online options that parents have. So if you are selecting an online option for your child and they are in the elementary level, there are two choices, and one is scheduled virtual. And the scheduled virtual option is that students would be Zooming in with their regular classroom teacher at a regularly scheduled time. So you will get a school schedule of what time school starts, when breaks are, when it's lunchtime, when school ends. And those are the times that you would expect instruction to be happening directly with the teacher. There will also be some independent activities happening in that time, students collaborating with each other. A lot of the things that you would see in a normal classroom happening in a virtual setting. If parents would like that type of online option, they still can change their mind at the time that we go back face to face. We don't know when that's going to be, and so depending on how far that is in the future, that may or may not cause a parent to want to change their decision. So we will ask again when it comes closer to time reopening. However, there is a second online option that's available to parents. And the thing that I would say about that option is it starts the first day of school and it's at least a 1 quarter commitment. And that is our flexible online program. And that is using either our Edgenuity program in 6th grade or our accelerated education program for those students in the age range of transitional kindergarten through 5th grade. This is a more flexible option. We heard from a lot of parents that trying to get their student engaged online during the school day might cause some difficulties with work schedules, childcare, things like that. So this is a little bit more of a flexible option for parents. We are sending out an email for people who choose the online option that gives them more information and even some videos that they can watch explaining this option to give them some more detailed information. But again, if this option is selected, this would be starting the first day of school and would go at least through the end of the first quarter. That you could go with that one, or it could also, if you choose to change that option, you can do that on a quarterly basis. For the secondary level, there are also 2 online options for those who are interested in that level, in that option as well. And again, the first option, parents will get a second chance to commit to this option at the time that face-to-face returns, and that is the Clovis Unified Connect. And again, for secondary students, they would get a set schedule with all of their class periods. They would be Zooming in with the teacher at the scheduled time, receiving direct instruction, interacting. And For secondary, we also have a flexible online option, and that would also be through Edgenuity. At the secondary level, however, that commitment is for the entire first semester. Because of the way that that program is designed, that is the commitment that we're asking from parents. And again, if you chose the online option, you will be getting an email that has some more specific information giving details and outlining this. You also can call your school site if you have any additional questions next week, and somebody will help you with determining that. Otherwise, all of the students in general will be doing online instruction that will mirror a lot that we do with the face-to-face instruction. So if you could complete your annual information update by tomorrow at the latest, and I know several parents have already done that and we appreciate that, but we also realize several parents were waiting for tonight to get some additional information before making that choice. I also want to put the little footnote too, that for our parents who have students with disabilities, if you choose an option that varies from your child's IEP, you may be required to participate in an IEP team meeting to determine appropriateness of that placement. So please keep that in mind as well. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and start with our first panelist today, who will be Teresa Pafford, who will address our first set of questions. Teresa?
Thank you, Dr. Castillo. So just before I begin, I just want to take a moment and just thank everybody and just acknowledge that we recognize that these have been really challenging times for all of us. We know that there have been adults and kids alike that have been negatively impacted by COVID, and we just want you to know that we feel for you. We've heard parents call us and say, you know, we're not teachers, and we so appreciate you working in partnership with us because we know it's been hard. We appreciate the positive emails that we've got. Honestly, we've had chills with some of them, just hearing the things that are going on and how you're able to work with your teachers and how your students are learning. In the same vein, we also appreciate hearing about the challenges because we really do want to be better. Next year, we've learned a lot, and we're looking forward to sharing that with you too. And we appreciate the long emails about solution-oriented ideas that you have brought forward of how we can make things work in the future too. And so a lot of great ideas out there. And so we've been processing those, and we thank you for those. I also want to thank my CAC committee because they too have been keeping me informed of conversations that are going on in the community and what you're saying and where your feelings are so that we can move forward. So I think you know, we all sit here that we know that we want our kids back in school because we believe for special ed, that's the best way for them to learn. But at this time, we're precluded from doing that. And so we know that the IEPs are written for a traditional model, but we're going to talk to you today about how we can do that in a distance learning model. So my first set of questions is really centered around assessment. So I'm just going to kind of group that together. So last March, we received guidance from the Office of Civil Rights that really discouraged in-person assessments for obvious reasons due to health and safety. So I'm excited to share that there's some good news on the horizon as we work with Fresno County Department of Public Health at this time. And I'm going to say that at this time, and I'm saying this very cautiously because we know that these things seem to change from moment to moment. But at this time, it looks like that we probably will be able to go ahead with in-person assessments. So that's really good news for our kids and for you. But we also know that there may be situations where in-person assessments might not be something that we're able to do, and that's okay, because in light of the fact that we're mandated to go to a distance learning model, we're also okay to do virtual assessments. And so I know that's something we haven't really done in the past, but moving forward, we will be able to do that. So we know that if we do hold any in-person assessments, we will have to have proper protective equipment in place. They will be handled at a school site location. But if we do them in a virtual setting, please know that those assessments are going to look a little different in your reports. You know, usually you'll see things in your reports about how your child is functioning in a regular classroom, but this time you'll see things about how your child is functioning in the new school, the virtual school. So that might look like their Zoom sessions or working side by side with you or in one-to-one assessments. So good news as we move forward. Again, I just want to preface that we're being cautious in saying that because we really are at the I want to say mercy of our County Department of Public Health and what we're given the approval to do. Dr. Castillo, should I go ahead with, should I keep going with my set of questions?
Yes, one thing that we did want to note, sorry, got a little technical difficulty here. For those who are having trouble viewing, if you could refresh the page, it should come back up and work properly that way. Yes, continue with your set of questions, Mrs. Paffer, thank you.
Okay, so like we got a lot of questions about assessments. I think the big question coming in is, what does my child's IEP look like? And so obviously in this format, I can't describe exactly your child's IEP, but I kind of want to give you some overarching thoughts. So now under our Senate Bill 98, we are required to execute your child's current IEP in a distance learning format. We're required to provide meaningful instruction during this pandemic, whether our schools are physically open or not. So just to reiterate, we want an in-person model, but precluded from doing that at this time. So in that being said, we also know that the components of your IEP being executed in distance learning model might look a little different, because just by sheer nature of the fact that it's a different model. And I'll give you an example of that. I think the biggest question that's coming in is, what about mainstreaming for my child? So, you know, a lot of you have your children that are going into general education classrooms. Maybe they're in a self-contained special education classroom, and they go in for general education time. So that might look different in that it might be a Zoom session with peers as well. So just kind of keep that in mind, that it's going to look a little bit different. Some things that you're going to receive from me, so just to give you a heads up, is you're going to get a letter from me that explains this distance learning model and what we're mandated to do. You received that letter from me back in March, actually it probably came out around April. Last year it was called a prior written notice. You'll get another one of those from me, and I'll also publish that on our CUSD website under the special education tab. So also, in addition to my letter, you're going to get a letter from the case manager of your child's IEP, and it's going to explain how your child's IEP is going to be executed under a distance learning plan. So again, you've had time, you've met with your team, you've done the IEP, you've given consent, you've given input, and now what we're required to do is explain how we can essentially try to replicate that in distance learning. So look at my notes here. Through Senate Bill 98, there is an addition to the components of the IEP also that are required. And so as you move forward, as you have annual IEPs or initial IEPs or triennial IEPs, you're also going to see what's called an emergency plan added into your IEP. So an emergency plan essentially just addresses very broad circumstances that in the event of an emergency, what are we going to do about it? I think the trick here is that we don't actually know what that emergency is. And so it's really hard to be very specific about that. So it'll be more general, but it'll let you know that we're going to start thinking about, you know, if we were to have something happen like we had happen now, what are we going to do about it? And how are we going to handle your child and your child's education?
Teresa, can I add to that as well? Those emergency plans written in the IEP are moving forward. We're not going back to amend IEPs to include those plans, correct?
Correct. Correct. So as your child's typical date would come up for the annual or the tri or the initial, that's the date you'll see that reflected into the IEP.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for clarifying that. So one of the questions that comes up a lot is kind of about regression. I know that for our kids being home, you're probably seeing behaviors and skills that are very different than what you're used to, and that's to be expected. We've got our kids trying to learn. And in an educational setting where this home is the educational setting, it's not typically what they would be learning in. I'm using my hands a lot, but you can't even see it, so it feels very weird. So what we're going to be doing with that too, and to talk about regression and recruitment, is that we acknowledge that there might be some regression, not just for kids with special needs, but for all kids. And we're looking at that as a district-wide. All kids are going to have some form of regression, and how are we going to address that? So as we come back to school, that's going to give our IEP teams time and our case managers time to get to know your kids and to assess where those learning gaps are so that we can adjust those IEPs accordingly for that. So one of the questions came up also about compensatory education in this, in light of regression. And so just to clarify on that, compensatory education is something that we refer to when there's a loss created by the school district in denying a student FAPE. So it's very clear that the schools denied FAPE and there's a loss because of it. In the sense of COVID and school closures, that's just simply not the case. We were here to offer FAPE, we wanted to offer FAPE, we want to be in person and provide that instruction. We were simply precluded from doing so in light of the circumstances. But again, those issues and those concerns will be addressed by your IEP teams and your teachers, and work with them too as your students return to school. So let me see. I think my next set of questions had to do with parents' roles in the distance learning process. So as I said earlier too, as I was starting out, parents are telling us, we're not teachers and it's so hard to balance. I've got work and I've got other kids. And that is it's a huge challenge. And so we also know that adult participation in the execution of this distance learning plan is really going to be integral for student success, not just for students with special needs, but just across the board. And I wanted to say adult participation too, because I know that can look very different from home to home. In March, there was just a lot of ambiguity regarding the parent's role or the adult's role in the home as to what their role was and how they needed to support or not support. But unlike in March, so that was then and this is now, we actually have compulsory education under SB 98 and this distance learning plan. So the law actually requires that your child participates in distance learning just like it required that you made them come to school. And so attending school is not an option, and they'll be expected to participate in daily live instruction with their teacher and peers. And CSD will be taking attendance just like before and following the same rules of attendance as pre-COVID. Okay. So I had a few questions just on policies and parent input on policy making. And so I think there's a lot to that. So I'll just kind of give an overarching answer and I can always speak on that further. Ultimately, it's the district's responsibility to offer a free and appropriate public education for your child. So as part of that, you have a lot of input in the IEP process. You know that we can't implement that IEP without your consent. So I just want to emphasize that in light of the circumstances, it's not special ed or the district that's making policies on the practice for distance learning. It's really much bigger than that. We've got the Senate Bill 98. We have a law in place, and that law actually led to add additions to the Ed Code, which in turn leads to policies and practices. So it's really state legislature that's decided what distance learning is going to look like, and it really ties our hands at this point as to how we are able to implement that from here on out. We do have the responsibility of our teams at the sites to figure out how to educate your child under the distance learning model. So we'll set up schedules, we'll get that instructional model set up for you. And I know there's going to be, I think Carrie's going to speak on that further here in a little bit. But if there's any questions, we're more than happy to have IEP team meetings to address those concerns. And just keep in mind that always the forum for really addressing those concerns specifically about your child starts at your school site and starts with your IEP team. Let's see, I had some questions about collaboration efforts with parents and outside agencies. And I can't speak highly enough of the partnerships that we have with many outside agencies and with our families. They're an invaluable resource, and I see no reason why that would change. So yes, we continue to do that. And then I had another question about visitation practices for parents. I know there's been there's practices for parents coming in and visiting the kids in the classroom. Actually, at this point, that's kind of a moot point, but I just wanted to address it. We won't have campus open right now, but parents are going to be there and can watch the Zoom sessions and support their kids. And I think that's going to be good on both fronts. You'll get to see what our students are doing in education. Our teachers are going to be able to work with you also and see how they can support you as we move forward in this venture together. So I think that's my set of questions for now. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Thank you, Mrs. Pefford. We appreciate you answering that set. And we have several sets that we'll move through with our panelists. And then again, we appreciate those parents who are sending in live questions from home, and we will get around to those after we finish the first set of questions. So next, we're going to move to our Director of Special Education, Mrs. Carrie Carter.
All right, so I have the privilege of talking about what does a day look like for your child? So as Teresa said, we will have live daily instruction for our students using online tools such as Zoom, Google Classroom, and Clever. For those of you that submitted questions about the instructional day and what that looks like and the delivery of services, thank you for sending those questions. Some of you also used that venue to just put some comments about how the spring did go well, and ESY, you noticed that teachers were kind of refining and tweaking things and really had some effective strategies that were being utilized during ESY. And so thank you for all those questions and those heartwarming comments. Our staff genuinely misses your kids. We all do so much. And so when we think about what is that instruction going to look like, we are going to do the best that we can to mirror an educational day through distance learning. So the day is going to start with elements of the instruction, with that direct instruction, maybe some ULS videos and doing those morning routines and greetings that we do. We'll utilize Zoom to have breakout sessions and breakout small groups. So in a classroom, when we would see a teacher start with direct instruction, and then we would have stations or centers and small group, we're going to continue that, but it's all going to be through Zoom. And so the teacher will be able to send students virtually to these breakout rooms. We'll be utilizing our instructional assistants. Maybe your child works with a SCIF or a one-to-one aid. We'll be having that support built into the instructional day. So, your student, if there's any prompting or cues, maybe some first then strategies to really get them to continue to engage in their learning. We're going to continue to use those strategies as if we were in the classroom and try to mirror what we can in this virtual environment. We'll have assignments, learning activities all throughout the day. One thing that I think is important to know is this distance learning is not just the teacher lecturing on Zoom all day long. Just like as a teacher, I wouldn't lecture to my students all day long. It would be broken up with those engaging learning activities where we have the direct instruction followed maybe by some guided practice where we're doing things together, facilitated by the teacher with our IAs providing that support to students, all via virtual environment, and then some independent practice. So students can have assignments, tasks, activities that they're working on, and they're not necessarily all being facilitated in that moment by the teacher. But as a student's working on something and they have a question, the Zoom is still open. The teacher's there. They're maybe working on other things, checking in with one student, but they're still available. And so students will still be able to reach out to that teacher and inquire if they need help, if they're stuck. Our IAs will continue to provide those strategies to continue that engagement. We also want to make sure there were some questions about some written and oral feedback, and I know that that was missed during the springtime. So that's something that we'll have built in as well. We know that feedback is so important as we continue to try and practice new things. We want that feedback so that we can learn and grow and continue to do things. And so we'll have that built in as well. We had some sample bell schedules, as Dr. Castillo referenced, that are available on our district website and that have been reviewed at the previous town hall. But I just wanted to kind of expand into how that works and looks for special education. So when we look at that day, I know there were some specific questions in that morning block of time that says 504 SST IEP. That time is for those meetings to occur, not services. So really, when you look at those sample schedules, and our school sites will be posting and communicating with you their schedules when they're finalized, but really students aren't logging on for their learning until around 9 o'clock on those sample schedules. And again, our school sites will get those out to you when they're finalized. But that first block of time that says 504 SST IEP, again, that's for those meetings to occur. And you may not have a meeting that day, but somebody else does. And so we want to give that time to our teachers. Also, when we look at the elementary schedules, we've got breaks as well as the secondary schedules. We've got breaks and lunchtime built in. So those things will continue to happen where our teachers take lunch just as our students are taking lunch. The role of the teacher, whether you're at the elementary, the junior high, or the high school, it's going to look similar to that traditional school day where they're starting that instruction and they're available to their students throughout the day. I think we had some different experiences during the spring, but as we've mentioned, this is different. We've got live daily instruction happening throughout the day. We'll have synchronous learning, which is where our students are engaged in their learning on the technology, whether it's Zoom, Google Classroom, whatever they're using, those platforms. And then we have asynchronous learning. So that's where students are working on those engaging activities, maybe that independent practice, may have some support from parents and family during that time, but that's that asynchronous learning where they're not technically engaging on the digital platform at that time. So that's still learning and that's still part of their instructional day, just like they would work on those assignments and tasks at school during the day. Our related service providers are going to be coordinating their schedules just as they would in a typical school year where they're meeting with your child's case manager. So if you have a child who receives OT services, for example, then that occupational therapist is going to connect with your child's teacher and coordinate time where they'll be working with your student. And what will happen is that occupational therapist will join that Zoom session that the teacher is having and your child is there. And then the teacher will send the occupational therapist and your student to a breakout room in Zoom. So the teacher can send them and they'll work on the progress towards their goal and the activities that they're working on during that time. Same thing if your child receives speech services. Those will continue to happen and our speech therapist will coordinate all of those schedules, whether they're pushing into a program and working with multiple students or your child has one-to-one speech therapy services. Those related service providers will join those Zoom sessions and then they'll join a breakout room to work either individually or in small groups with students. So you can expect all of those related services that your child may receive on their IEP to continue to happen only in a virtual model. We've got couple questions about some of the strategies that maybe parents can utilize when they run into just some challenges with my student wasn't engaging in their learning. They didn't want to participate. So our IAs and our teachers are going to work together on those strategies. What would they have done in the classroom? When a student maybe doesn't want to engage in their learning, what strategies would they use? They're going to go to that toolkit that they have and utilize those strategies in that virtual environment. And then if they're still not having success, they're going to come together with other IEP team members and have conversations of what are some other things we can try? What can we do? They're going to partner with you. Maybe try this and have some recommendations for you to try in the home that can help your child engage in their learning. And so we're going to work together on different strategies and tips that can help your child engage in their learning. We know that it's a partnership and that we need your support on this, and we appreciate that. We also had some questions about technology. And If you have a child that's in need of a device, please make note of that on your annual information update. We want to make sure that you have what you need to help your child continue to work on their goals and engage in their learning. So please note that on there. If you've already submitted it and you didn't check something, it's not too late. Reach out to your child's teacher and we'll make sure to get them what they need. So we want to make sure we have that. We also have some great technology resources on our website, at the district's website. So if you're maybe looking to purchase something for your child, want to make sure that it is compatible with what we use. They've got some great information on there. And I know Ruth is going to talk about some training for technology for parents and students. And so I'll let her get to that. But as far as technology, we've got that available. And finally, some training for our teachers and our IAs as well. We want to make sure that, that they're getting some training so that what happened in the springtime when we responded to the pandemic, we want to make sure this is a rigorous, engaging learning. We want it to be meaningful. And so we want to make sure that we are providing our staff with training so that they can provide meaningful instruction in this virtual model. And I think those are all of the questions for me at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Carter. We appreciate all of those responses. And for our next set of questions, we have Ms. Steffi, our assistant, one of our assistant directors. So Ruth, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Robin. Is my voice okay? I heard I was lagging a little bit. Can you hear me? Is it working? Hello? Is it okay? Okay, I'm gonna go for it then. Wave your hands around if you need me to stop, and I'll try to talk slowly. Okay, thanks, Kelly, for the thumbs up. So I'm excited to talk. I've got 3 great questions that we're gonna get through, hopefully. The first one that I wanna talk about is with face masks. And we've had a lot of parents concerned, what's gonna be required of my student when we come back to school? My student is unable to wear a face mask. Will they be allowed to go back to school? So I wanna talk about what we know right now and sort of what our plan is to get all of our kids back when we're allowed to have in-person instruction. So the health department has issued some pretty clear guidelines regarding face coverings that we'll be following as a district and as a special ed department once we return to that on-site instruction. And those guidelines are that face coverings are going to be required for 3rd grade students and above. So preschool, kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade don't have to wear them, but if your student is in 3rd grade or above, they're required. So that means all staff members will be masked. Right now, that's the mandate. Recently, the public health director in Governor Newsom's office stated that students who refuse to wear a mask should not be allowed on campus. So right now, we've got to train up our kiddos and get them used to those masks as we know you're doing at home. So it's a health and safety issue. And so if your student is in 3rd grade or above, masks will be required unless there's an exemption. So let's talk about exemptions. We know that there's many variables in special ed because we're special ed. And so if your child needs an exemption, it's got to be a medical condition that a doctor writes a note for. So if you go to your doctor and tell them, I'm concerned about school, we need an exemption, to talk with your doctor. Any medical exemptions from a doctor will be honored. They won't have to wear those masks, okay? With our students, and in many cases, we do believe that wearing that mask is a teachable skill. It's a life skill that our students will need for a while, we think, in this new reality of COVID. Going to the store, going to the doctor is going to require those face masks for a while, probably. So we want to help our students learn to tolerate those masks as soon as possible. If you don't have a doctor's note, but as a parent, you feel your child should still be exempt because of their disability, we understand that as well. So that's a conversation that we're going to encourage you to have with your child's case manager and teacher and IEP team. So we are welcome to that input as well. If you don't have a doctor's note, share those concerns. Again, this is more towards when we're back to in-person instruction, but the doctor's note can exempt them. And if you have concerns based on their disability, have that conversation with your child's teacher or your case manager. And then again, please keep in mind, it's all subject to change once we're approved. And the Department of Health does have the authority to shut down schools if those guidelines of distancing and face coverings and cleaning aren't followed. So our number one safety is still going to be this, our number one priority is still going to be the safety of our kiddos and our staff on campuses. And then related to the mask, we've had some questions about shields. So we've seen the shields that are being worn, and we've had questions about, can we wear a shield in place of a mask? And we also realized that we have students and service providers who may need to have their mouth visible. We have speech therapy that needs to happen where children can see mouth. We have students who are deaf and hard of hearing and interpreters where it's important that their mouth is visible to get that communication that they need. Right now, the directive is, even with the shield, a mask is still required. We will see if that changes. But what we're doing is we are piloting some of those masks that are clear, that are covered, and so our germs stay in our little bubble, but the mouths are visible. It's interesting that we piloted some with our speech therapists during ESY. Some of them just fogged up too much and weren't usable, but we are finding the right product to use when our kids come back to school. So we are taking that into consideration that some of our kids do need to have their mouth visible for their teachers, for their aides, for their interpreters, and we're working on that. Okay, so that's mask question. And then there was many questions that were sent in about progress on goals, progress on grades. How are parents going to be notified, and is it going to be different than it was from March until when summer started? And so again, it's a different educational world that we're in now, but all staff and all service providers are going to be required to address those goals, collect the data, and then present progress monitoring to parents according to their IEPs. So just like Gen Ed, we're going back to our pre-COVID grading practices. Schools no longer considered closed due to COVID. You may have seen that on some of our notices saying, we couldn't address it because school was closed. That's no longer happening. We're going to address those goals with bigger. And so you will get notices on progress reports as you were according to their IEP at that time. Both RSP students and SDC students will still be receiving report cards, the same as their general ed peers, in addition to progress on their IEPs. Those SDC teachers will report on the subjects that are covered during each reporting period. Sometimes they cover history and gen ed, but not science, and so it's not recorded at the same time. So that will be the same thing. So you can expect progress reports on a timely basis based on their IEP as well as report cards. So there's that. And then the last one I wanted to talk about, Carrie alluded to that, is we've had many questions about where's training for parents? Where can I get help with this curriculum? How can I get help with technology? And so we reached out to our technology department and said, we know there's so much available. Is it in one spot? And we have some great answers for you. There are a lot of videos, there are a lot of frequently asked questions, and there's a lot of screenshotted things to walk you through online. So really quickly, I'm just going to tell you how to get there because it helps me, and I won't take up too much more time. But on our main web page, if you go to the Departments tab, click on Information and Technology Service, there'll be a drop-down panel that says Technology Help for Students. So if you can get there where it says Technology Help for Students, there you'll find help on a plethora of topics. Anything from I can't log in, my password's not working, or I have a district laptop and I can't get the hotspot to work. There's troubleshooting videos there. There's help for Clever. There's help for some Google App Assistance. There's links to videos currently for our language arts. There's a curriculum where you can watch the videos and see the tutorials. So you can help along at home with what the teachers are doing. Again, there's videos, tutorials, and then as more trainings opportunities are available, they'll be posted there. So make sure that you bookmark that page if you have questions and need help and want to watch those tutorials. We need to also share that if a teacher or a department is using a special digital curriculum that's not district-wide, then the teacher would be the point person for those kind of questions if you have them. And then I wanted to pass along one final message from our technology department that they just said it's really important to make sure that your parents have their updated information in queue. There's especially an updated email address and phone number so they can connect with you if things go wrong. So those are the three I have.
Hey, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And we are going to move on to our next panelist, Mrs. Ann Castillo, another one of our assistant directors. So Ann.
Thanks, Robin. I've got a lot of great questions here. We've gotten multiple questions on same topic, so I'm going to combine some of them and hope that I can answer your questions. We've got a lot of inquiries about if school employees can come into the home and provide services. That can be speech and language therapists, your mental health therapist, maybe your child's special circumstance independence facilitator. And I really need to take you back to what the California Department of Public Health has guided us to. I'm sorry, it's not guided, it's mandated. Let me correct that. So as you know, just a couple weeks ago, we have a mandate. We are on California's COVID watch list. And because Fresno County is on California's COVID watch list, we must remain online. And there's, of course, a series of requirements that we have to meet in order to get off that watch list. And that's well laid out there and on our website. And of course, you can find that anywhere on if you just Google it. But because Clovis Unified is part of Fresno County, and we're going to need to remain on this watch list, we can't do on-site instruction, and that includes face-to-face instruction, and that includes face-to-face instruction in the home. And so we know that we have students that receive home hospital instruction. This is pre-COVID, and it's currently still on their IEP or home instruction. We cannot send staff in the home because we would not be compliant with that new mandate. So for students who are receiving home instruction or home hospital, they also will be served through the distance learning model. There has been a couple questions that have come through right now about how students with severe disabilities are served through distance learning. I can tell you that I've been blessed for many, many years to be a part of the severely disabled population of students in this district, and have recently have communicated with teachers from our population or our programs to ask how they are going to meet these guidelines set forth by the Senate Bill 98. I'm going to tell you there's a lot of creativity here. They're leaning on each other as well, because our students who have more severe cognitive disabilities aren't exempt from the rigorous education online and the daily check-ins. And so that may look a little bit different, but they all have access. I participated in a virtual prom for a severely disabled program this summer. And I'm like, if they can pull that off, we can pull anything off. And so creativity for sure, but it does require a lot of parent participation as well. 100% that this is going to be a joint effort between both school and home in order for this to be a successful experience. And again, Teresa has said it, Carrie has said it, Emer has said it, that this is not our plan, is to do home instruction forever. I mean, we want our students back passionately. This is not what we wanted. And so the minute we can get them back, we'll celebrate, but we are going to do all we can to educate all of our students. And again, that collaboration between home and school is of the utmost importance. Okay, so I talked about coming into the home. We had a lot of parents really concerned about maybe their level of aggression or behavior within the home. Maybe their child has a behavior support plan or behavior intervention plan that maybe a computer triggers them and puts them in a place where they could likely harm themselves or others. So Teresa talked about that distance learning plan, and that distance learning plan is specific to your child's unique needs. This is not a one copy for all different students. This is specifically written by your child's IEP team on how they're going to execute your child's services on the IEP in this distance learning section, distance learning time. I say to you that service providers that have been on your child's IEP team will continue to be on your child's IEP team. They are your team. If you are struggling at home because you're not able to assist your child in accessing their education, please, please, please reach out to them. They are your resource. And we want to work together to do the best that we can during these distance learning times. If you have questions and concerns, I would like to inform you that one of your parent rights is to call a meeting and to hear your concerns. We really want to hear those and work together with you. There's resources as far as in the community. For those of you who have students who are eligible for Central Valley Regional Center, reach out to them. There might be additional resources that can support your child while at home. And you know that we work in unison with CVRC as well. I think I was on my soapbox there for a moment, but if you got anything from that, I just hope you know that we are passionate about serving your student. We want to collaborate with you, communicate with you, and if you are having trouble with anything, please reach out. The entire team is a resource to you. Another question came through is, you know, my child, as part of their day when we were in school, they had a community component to their IEP, or to their day, not necessarily their IEP. And I'm going to go back again to that distance learning plan. We know that activities that were available prior to March are not available right now. And so that distance learning plan and how we're going to execute their services is going to be specific to your child's needs. So if your child is in the adult transition program and they go out to Walmart a couple times during the week to practice some of their skills, our responsibility is to make sure that your teacher, or your child's teacher, not your teacher, your child's teacher is coming up with exercises and activities that support making progress towards that goal. That's going to look different now that we're on distance learning. So please know that. We can encourage you as a family to replicate some of those that you may be able to do out in the community with your child, safely, of course, that we may not be able to do right now, and we can support you and give you ideas and resources that way as well. But again, the special education team will come up with the way in which they will execute the services on your child's current IEP to meet those goals. I think that's it. I think that's it. Sorry, I was looking at, I think another question came through, but I think we're good.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. We will move to some of the live questions that we received. And so I will go through those, and I will be sending out questions to some of our different panel members. So I will read the question to you that we got, and then if you could give us a response, we would appreciate it. So before we send it out to the panelists, there were a couple of things that I wanted to give some clarification to that people had questions about, and that was with the online option. So know that all students are starting online, and most students will receive online instruction through Zoom during the regular school schedule. So that will be the option. It will be using our regular Clovis Unified curriculum and textbooks, and it will look as much as it can like what we normally do in the classroom. The other online options I talked about might be the exception if you had a specific need in your family that you wanted to access the Edgenuity and the accelerated education. So an example of that might be a parent who's concerned about not being able to help their child during the school day because they work, and they would like to have some curriculum where they would help direct students in the evening time when they're available to do that. That might be an option for you. Or we have some families that maybe their family would like to do more instruction on one day and less on another. If they're traveling or have different family circumstances, Edgenuity would be fine for that. We know we have some teenagers that like to do a lot of things at 11 o'clock at night, and they could have that type of option with Edgenuity as well. But for the most part, the bulk of our students will be receiving online instruction, as I first described, through Zoom on a regular schedule with a classroom teacher, again, trying to mirror as much as we can with what the regular school day looks like. There was another question about where we can find online schedule for our students, and will we be contacted by teachers to arrange Zoom meeting and such. So our schedules are being finalized and those will be out next week. And so you will be able to find those on your school website. I am sure that the school sites will be communicating that to all of their families to let you know what those will be, what the expectations are. Classroom teachers will be reaching out with all the information that you need because we're going to have students that need to get textbooks and supplies, computers. We have families that will need hotspots. So your school sites will definitely be reaching out to you with all of that information to keep you informed with what you would need. Another clarification is whether or not students would be able to participate in sports in the spring 2021 season if he or she is still enrolled in online learning or online with a flexible schedule. The spring semester, that is when we're hoping that our athletics will resume. And so it's if a student is doing online instruction at our online school, they are not eligible for athletics. If they're doing online that is on scheduled online in the spring, they would be able to participate in athletics. If you have questions about that, I would really encourage you to contact your school site and they can tell you with your specific student and your specific situation what the answer to that question would be. So I'm going to start fielding some questions to our panel members, and I am going to start with our Deputy Superintendent, Mr. Anderson. We're pleased that he could join us again today. And so, Mr. Anderson, we had a question that the new educational minutes for this year have been reduced to 240 minutes for secondary students. So can you please explain why you're requiring students to go over the recommended amount of minutes, and why a special education student would be required to go to an extra 60 minutes on Wednesday mornings? And I think that's actually maybe a misunderstanding that you can clarify.
Yeah, I'd be more than pleased to answer that. And I think when you mentioned me going first, everybody on the panel smiled that they didn't have to go first. So I just think you made a lot of friends there. But yes, the governor and the State Department of Education did come out with minimum minutes requirements, which are 240 at that level that we're talking about, at least for the intermediate school and everything else. And if you look real closely at the calendar, and I think Mrs. Carter kind of clarified this a little bit earlier as well, on Wednesdays or any of the block days, quite honestly, for secondary, they're all 240 minutes. So they're right at the minimum. That's what it is. There is a 60-minute time prior to that is actually for SSTs and IEPs and those types of things. And also on those days, on the schedule, the time schedule, you'll see a 0 period. 0 period isn't for every student. It's listed there as 60 minutes because we do have some students that want to take an extra class, either to accelerate, or that's when there's a possible class that they can fit into their schedule. There's limited offerings during that time. That is on the schedule, but again, very minimal number of students actually attend that one period. So that wouldn't be for all students.
Okay, thank you very much. We did have another question that kind of goes along with that, Mr. Anderson. If our county does get off the watch list, at what point would we go right back to in-person instruction, or would there be a waiting period? There was concerns about having a child get used to online and then all of a sudden the next day you would have to switch back. So what would that look like time-wise?
Yeah, no, I think there's a concern for students getting used to online and teachers getting used to online. There's no doubt about it. As everybody's kind of said, we want this online experience to be the best that it can be. And we know that that's going to take a little bit of work, and there's a lot of training going on with teachers, and it's also training students to get used to the system as well. But I think everybody is kind of concerned that we're going to be like we were in March. March 13th, we're in one, and March 16th, all of a sudden we switched over the weekend with really no notification from given to us or for anybody, but it was just the way that it kind of worked. But we're seeing, what we're anticipating is a slower transition back into face-to-face. So when we are allowed to, when we're anticipating, and we have lots of people that are watching the data, they're watching the numbers, they're watching to see when we can anticipate getting back into and out of the watch list. But right now that doesn't look very promising, I'll be honest with you. And so, but we will be watching those. We can talk a little bit later about the meetings that we attend to kind of get that data as well. but we're probably anticipating a 2-week transfer from one method to allow sort of a method of instruction and grades and those types of things to be finalized. Also gives us another chance to survey parents again to see which model do they, are they pretty good with the model that they're in and they're willing to go back to face-to-face, because the goal really is to get everybody back face-to-face as soon as we can. And so, but it won't be as soon as we can doesn't mean the next day or even the next week. It'll probably be, I would say, a 5 to 10 school day transfer back into a face-to-face.
Okay, thank you. And along with that, maybe lastly, you could speak to, there are a lot of changing health mandates and guidelines. What does the communication look like to school districts to keep up with all of that? And how is it that the school districts keeping informed and sharing that with parents?
Yeah, I think I kind of shared this with I have 2 high school age students, and to tell them I don't know, or we're waiting to hear, or we should be hearing about it soon, just agonizes them to no end. And so on the other end, when we're asking the questions of the Fresno County Department of Public Health or the State Department of Education, and they're saying, we're not really sure yet, but we're going to work on that, it aggravates us as well too. So there's no doubt about it. But I'd say it's not from lack of meeting, and it's not from a lack of processing and asking the right questions. Dr. O'Farrell and I attend a meeting with Fresno County Superintendent Jim Yovino and the Fresno Health Department every Thursday. We were on there today. By the way, special education was discussed a lot today from all districts because of the same questions we've kind of heard about today as well. So it gives us an opportunity to ask the most pressing questions, because Mr. Yovino speaks directly with Tony Thurman, the state superintendent. David Palmaville and Dr. Vora are our Fresno County Health Department experts here, who are also working with the California State Department of Education. So they're letting us know as quickly as they are aware of any pending mandates or any pending guidelines that they think may be coming down the pipe. But sometimes they truly are a bit surprised at what comes out of the state's office as well too. But it does give us a chance to at least make sure both of those entities are asking questions outside Fresno County to the State Department and getting us the most updated information.
Thank you very much. I was telling our special education staff yesterday, my dad used to live in Oklahoma, and he used to say, if you don't like the weather, wait 15 minutes. And sometimes we feel like that's how things are coming at us, with changes every 15 minutes. So we appreciate all the efforts keeping up with that, and we'll be sure to communicate that out. I have a question for Mrs. Pafford. My child has had options to start mainstreaming. How will that be handled in online and distance learning, and is that still an option?
Yes, absolutely. That's still an option. If that's something your IEP team has been talking about, then that's something we want to continue to have those conversations about. Obviously, it's going to look a little different because it will be in a distance learning model. So it could be some Zoom sessions with groups. But one of the things your teams will want to look at is, why is your child mainstreaming? So what are the goals that are leading to that provision of mainstreaming? And then that'll help guide that conversation as to what that's going to look like. So it's kind of a general answer. Again, go back to your IEP team, because they really are the ones that know your child the best. And you can talk with them about that and to collaborate on that and come up with a good plan.
And Mrs. Pafford, we had another question about 504 plans. Can you explain how 504 plans will work through distance learning?
Sure. So 504 plans are not part of special ed. They're part of general ed, actually. But what they do is they essentially level the playing field for our kids. And so we have every intention, and just like with IEPs, the 504s will continue to be implemented. So your 504 coordinator at your site will also be meeting with you just as they typically would and having those discussions. And we'll have to look and see if there's any conversations that need to be had regarding how that 504 can be implemented in the distance learning model. Then we'll have those conversations and do that.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Carter, I have one for you. The question is, my student is in the general classroom setting, however, goes to RSP for 90 minutes per day. What will this look like during distance learning? So maybe any RSP student, what would that look like?
Absolutely. So for our RSP students, our RSP teachers are going to connect with that general education classroom teacher right away at the start of the school year and coordinate their schedules just like they would a normal school year. And they'll have that time where they're either pushing in to join your child's general education classroom setting to provide those supports, or they'll schedule time where they're pulling your student out for RSP services, maybe in smaller group or one-on-one. So what they'll do is our RSP teachers will have all of the Zoom links to the general education classroom teachers' Zoom sessions, and they'll push in and join in those Zooms. And then maybe in the chat box, they'll send a private message to the classroom teacher of, I'm here to work with, this student or these students. And then the classroom teacher will send them into a breakout room on Zoom where they'll provide that support. So those RSP students will continue to receive the supports and services that they need, and have that time with their RSP teacher.
Can I add to that really quickly? I don't know if you want to add on, but I just want to say too, that's another way we will be utilizing our instructional assistants. They will be working too. And so some of our IAs will be in those classrooms supporting the kids as well, elementary, secondary. So it might be the RSP teacher, but we're going to utilize our instructional assistants to do that as well to help support that online learning in Gen Ed. So just want to throw that in there.
Thank you. I've got another one that I'm going to bounce back to Mrs. Pafford. Is there any additional information you can give about the adult transition program and what that might look like? I know it was mentioned earlier a little bit about some of the experiences that might look different with visiting Walmart, but maybe an overall picture of that program.
Right. Oh, good question. So yes, for special education, we service our kids, our babies from birth all the way to age 22. And the interesting thing about SB 98 is it really covers K through 12. So as we move forward, we're going to overlay what we're doing with K through 12 all the way from our young ones in preschool and up to our adult programs, just keeping in mind that a lot of our practices are really going to be guided by our guidance from the Department of Public Health as far as what we can do with the services. So we'll continue to hold IEPs and do all of those things, or IFSPs, as we were doing before. It'll just be in a distance learning model.
Okay, thank you very much. Mrs. Pafford, there's another question that said you talked about emergency clause of IEP and not going back. What happens if your IEP isn't until the end of the year?
Okay, so the mandate to add that emergency clause can happen anytime throughout the school year. And again, it's a very broad statement because emergencies in Ed Code cover everything from floods to fires to road closures, and it's very, very broad. If it's really something you want to discuss with your IEP team, you certainly can talk to them about that, but it's required to do it at your typically scheduled IEP meeting.
Okay. Mrs. Carter, I have another question for you. What happens when the child is going to a new classroom or teacher and aides, and they don't know how to get them to engage? Example, moving from 3rd grade to 4th grade, it's a new teacher, new set of aides. What would be done to sort of help with that transition?
Absolutely. So we do have transition meetings that occur, and even though those are occurring virtually, those teams are talking and communicating. So as those transitions occur, the teacher that supported your child last year is having conversations with the new teacher and team for this year. And so what strategies were effective? What worked? So that we can continue to utilize those. And it's a different environment with different peers. And so our teachers and our IAs also have their toolkit filled with other strategies that they can also try in addition. But really that communication piece is so important, and working with the team that supported your child, that knows your child, is critical. And so we have those conversations happening, and we'll continue to support them in that new environment.
Okay, and another one, Mrs. Carter, this is a good question. I think with parents, sometimes we have some struggles with students at home. They always think the teacher knows it better than the mom sometimes. So how do we engage children that are resistant to virtual instruction? They might do really well face-to-face, but maybe that virtual is a challenge. So do you have any advice for parents on maybe how to engage students or where to get support?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you know what, our children look to us as their parents. not as their teacher. And so for us to be the ones putting those academic demands on them, it doesn't feel right to our kids, and it can be a little confusing and just not maybe welcome at all. And so I know that Anne referenced a little bit about, what to do when they're not engaging in that learning. And we want to utilize our strategies that our IAs and that our teachers have, working with our school psychologists and our behavior specialists on what are some great engaging activities that we can utilize with students. What would we do if we were in that normal, typical classroom setting? What would we try? What strategies would we use? And then to use those and apply those in a virtual way. It's going to look different. We're going to modify it, and we'll continue to exhaust all means. We'll also partner with you. And so we'll have maybe some suggestions of and ask you to try some things that we'll model and explain, but have you try on your end too, and just continue to work as a part in a partnership. And it may take a couple times and a couple different things that we're trying, but we'll really continue to partner with you and utilize all of the different supports that we have available in Clovis Unified with our behavior specialists, with our school psychologists, with our teachers and our trained staff, and we'll work together until we get it right.
Thank you. It's nice to know that there's a strong support staff, because this is very challenging for all of us. As we've all mentioned, this isn't anything any of us expected to be doing. As educators, we are often saying to each other, when did we ever think we were going to have a time where we couldn't bring our students to school? That's the last thing that you would ever imagine would happen as an educator. And but we're committed to addressing the challenges the very best way that we can. And that's one of the reasons that we want to have a town hall like this, to receive questions and to engage our community. Again, we really appreciate those who submitted questions either ahead of time or this evening. As I mentioned, we'll put together some frequently asked questions that we can post that you can refer back to. Again, if you have specific questions about your individual child, I really encourage you to reach out to the classroom teacher. They will be able to answer those questions for you. Also, our special education office is also available if they can support you in any way. This is a true partnership. We thank all of our parents for joining us tonight. Like I said, these are challenging times, and your voice is such an important component to providing this partnership between the school and the parents, so that we have the best absolute program for our students. As mentioned, we absolutely miss our students, and that's the part that we're all waiting is. And even if we have to pop in and see them in Zoom, we're excited to have them, and we can't wait for school to start and to have our kids join in. So again, I want to thank our panel today for your time answering these questions. I want to thank our Deputy Superintendent, Mr. Anderson, and our Superintendent, Dr. O'Farrell, for being here today. I know special education is very important to our entire team, and it's a priority for all of us. So I really want to thank all of you for joining us tonight, and we hope everyone has a good evening, and we're looking forward to the start of school. So thank you.